Chapter 12. Try to Catch Me. At Mr. Simpson's announcement, all eyes turned in his direction, and there were gasps of astonishment. "You actually met Gus Woonton's parents?" Nancy asked. The actor smiled. "A Gus Woonton. He may not be the person you're looking for." "Oh, I'm sure he is," Beth said excitedly. George remarked, "It's a rather uncommon name. Where did Mr. and Mrs. Woonton say their son is?" "They didn't say." Hannah Gruen spoke up. "That's not surprising if he was a problem child. It isn't exactly a subject they'd be likely to talk about to strangers." George asked, "Where do Mr. and Mrs. Woonton live now?" The actor shook his head, saying he had met them in St. Louis about 4 years before, but had never seen them again. "I heard through some friends of mine I knew in the theater that both the Woontons had passed away." "Poor Gus," said Nancy. After a moment, she added, "Mr. Simpson, have you any idea when this happened and where?" "Sorry, but I haven't. If it will help you, I might try to track down some information through those same friends." Nancy thanked him, but suggested that he not bother until after she had talked with her father. "Perhaps he can find out. St. Louis is a good lead." "I understand," the actor went on, "that the Woontons I met had a great deal of money in savings accounts and securities. This fact should help you in tracking down the couple." Nancy smiled. "It's a very good clue, Mr. Simpson. I'll phone my father in a little while and tell him." Dinner was over a short time later. By tacit arrangement, Miss Carter and Mr. Simpson were left alone in the living room. Mrs. Beeling and Hannah went into the kitchen, while Bess and George carried out the empty dishes from the table. Nancy telephoned her father, who was amazed at the progress she had made on the case. He promised to call the Beverly immediately and to let Nancy know what he found out. "I can't wait to hear," she said. In about an hour, Mr. Drew telephoned his findings. He said that the owner of the Beverly, Dr. Norton Jones, had been astonished to learn that Mr. and Mrs. Woonton had passed away. "Dr. Jones told me," the lawyer went on, "that no checks for services to Gus had come for several months before the young man had run away. The owner had not been surprised at this. He had assumed Gus's parents were on a long trip and would eventually pay. He was amazed when I told him what we suspect about Gus, saying the Beverly had tried without success to find him. The doctor had thought possibly Gus knew where his parents were and had gone to them." Nancy and her father talked for a long time, speculating on whether Gus had flown to St. Louis or some other place to claim the money which probably had been left to him. "If he did," Nancy said, "why would he have come back here? Dad, I think perhaps Gus doesn't know his parents have passed away. He couldn't find them, and since this house is his true home, he came here." "Perhaps," the lawyer said. "I'll make inquiries in St. Louis tomorrow morning. I hope I can turn up some worthwhile information for you, Nancy. And now I'll say good night. Sweet dreams. And to you too, Dad." As Nancy put down the phone, Mr. Simpson, carrying Miss Carter, came into the hall. He laughed gaily and said, "I thought I'd bring my bride-to-be to her room. Also, I wanted to say good night to the rest of you." Nancy and the others accompanied the couple to Miss Carter's room, where they all chatted for a while. The actor declared that this was the most delightful evening he had spent in a long time, and promised to return soon. "I'll be waiting," Miss Carter told him with a happy laugh. After he had gone, Mrs. Beeling and Hannah Gruen went around to check all the windows and doors on the first floor. They were securely locked. The lights were turned off, and everyone went to bed. Nancy found it difficult to sleep. She turned from side to side, trying to put the mystery out of her mind, but found this impossible. Suddenly, she became aware of tapping sounds. Nancy was not sure of their location, but thought they were coming from the first floor. "If that's the mysterious tapper back again," she thought, "how did he enter the house?" Apparently, he had sneaked in after the police had made their round. Maybe I can get a message across to him. Nancy quickly put on her robe and the tap shoes which she had brought with her. She tiptoed into the hall and listened. The tapping sound was indeed coming from the first floor. Slowly and quietly, Nancy descended the front stairway. By this time, she knew the house so well she could make her way in the dark. Her heart thumping, Nancy traced the sounds. They were coming from under the dining room floor. She tiptoed to the spot. The staccato noises were definitely not in code, but did resemble the sounds of tap dancing. What should she do now? I'd better not go into the basement alone, Nancy decided. Perhaps I should run upstairs and wake the others. Then, to her amazement, the tapping sounds began to come in Morse code. The message was, "Try to catch me." "Who are you?" Nancy tapped back. There was no answer. On a sudden hunch, she sent a message of her own. "If you are Gus Woonton, I have some very valuable information for you." There was complete silence. Had the mysterious intruder fled? Nancy's loud tapping had aroused the sleepers upstairs. All of them except Miss Carter came rushing down, turning on lights. "Nancy!" Bess cried out. "What's going on? Why didn't you call us?" "I'll explain later," Nancy replied. "Right now, we have a good chance to solve the mystery. Divide up and look outdoors and all through the house for the tapper. George, will you come to the basement with me?" As the others scattered, the two girls unlocked the door to the basement and hurried down the steps. George had snapped on the light as they descended, and now she and Nancy gazed around them. They saw no one. Windows and the outside door were locked. "Where could the tapper have gone?" George asked, puzzled. "The only other opening we know of leads to the secret room. Let's look in there." Nancy got the hook and the panel was yanked open. The secret room was vacant. The two girls made a minute search of the walls, but found no sign of another concealed opening. Then they tested the ceiling and finally searched the floor for a trap door to a sub-cellar. Their efforts were futile. George frowned. "This is impossible." Nancy went out to the big room and sat down to think. She was certain there must be another opening into the basement. George came to stand in front of her friend. "Let's face it, the tapper is really cool. Why don't we forget him and just try to find out why he was tapping?" Nancy stood up and said she would get the small stepladder from the kitchen. She was back in a couple of minutes and set it under the spot from where the tapping had come. George, meanwhile, had found a hammer. She handed it to Nancy, who began to tap for hollow places in the ceiling. "There are a lot of deep dents in the wood," she remarked, "but I don't hear any hollow sounds." "Probably," said George. "The man was tapping to attract your attention and just goading you on to hunt for him." "But why?" Nancy asked. "That's a good question," George replied. Nancy moved the stepladder a few feet and tapped again on the ceiling. In a moment, her eyes lighted up. "George, I found something!" George held the flashlight toward the spot. "See any openings or cracks?" she asked hopefully. "No, but I think this beam moves. Climb up here with me and see if we can budge it." The two girls pushed and pulled on the beam. "Is it my imagination?" George said presently. "Or did this move a teeny bit?" "I think it did," Nancy replied. "Let's pull harder." Nancy and George tugged so hard that both of them lost their balance and were forced to jump to the floor. Before they had a chance to climb the ladder again, they were interrupted by Bess. She called down frantically from the top of the stairway. "Come here, quick!" Nancy and George dashed to the kitchen. Bess was already running out the back door. The other girls followed. "What's up?" George queried. Bess pointed. Mrs. Beeling and Hannah Gruen were bending over an unconscious man who was face down in the driveway. End of chapter 12.